This is a really exciting episode. I wanted to find more about my own attachment style as well because it's kind of confusing. I thought there was one strict criteria you had to meet to be in a specific or have a specific attachment style. And what I found in my research is that it can change and you can morph different attachment styles throughout your life depending on the person that you're with and also the experiences that you have. Because your brain is elastic, you can form it in a different way. So you can go from being insecure to having a secure attachment, or you can go from having a secure attachment maybe to having an insecure, depending on the relationships you have in your adulthood. But usually the blueprint for your attachment style that you're going to have in your adulthood is set out for you in the first 7 years of your life. So they would be the crucial years where your personality is developing, your attachment styles are developing, your conflict resolution skills are developing, your self-worth, your self-esteem, all of that is developing within your first 7 years, and that is usually going to be indicative of the person that you're going to be in your adulthood and how you're going to react to life's obstacles. So the way that your parents treat you as a child usually depicts the type of person that you're going to go with in your adulthood or when you start dating or being romantically involved with people. So for example, if you're used to love and affection and being told that you're worth something and being proven time and time again that your parents are going to love you regardless of your behaviour, you are going to seek out that in a partner as well. So you are going to seek someone who is loyal to you, who is going to be with you through ups and downs. But if you have an unreliable parent, or maybe they show you conditional affection, so if you're only on good behaviour, they'll give you love and affection, or you feel like their love is conditional for you, that's usually, you're going to mirror that in your romantic relationships. So you're going to seek out familiarity and comfort because that's what you're used to. Your parents basically set the bar for your self-worth and what you think that you deserve. You know that saying from The Perks of Being a Wallflower, we accept the love we think we deserve. That's usually the first person that is supposed to love you unconditionally is your parent. So we will mirror that and replicate that throughout our lives to try to appease that inner child in us, but also just because that is setting the bar in our heads for how we're supposed to be loved. How are we supposed to know what conditional true love even feels like if we haven't received that from our parents? So we are just going to repeat that same pattern over and over again. Whereas if we do feel unconditional, unbelievable love from our parents, we will find that then again in romantic partnerships and in other relationships in our lives, like friendships as well. And this can apply to any relationship you have with people, friendships, colleagues, kind of anyone you are going to have a close relationship with or are going to inevitably get into conflict with. This is going to be a pattern throughout your whole life, and something that we should be aware of. What I found out is there are two types of attachment: secure attachment and insecure attachment. But with insecure attachment, there is anxious, which is probably the one we are all very aware of, avoidant, which we're all very aware of as well. I mean, protagonists in usually films and books are the embodiment of these kind of attachment styles. We never really hear a story of someone with a secure attachment because it's safe and it's boring. There's nothing to write about there. You know, it's just things are usually going smoothly and things work out for them. It's like the conflict resolution comes naturally and there's usually not huge ups and downs or anything to write about. So anytime we watch a film or a rom-com or a drama, it's usually people who have insecure attachments. But the official names for them are preoccupied, which I would think of as the anxious one, which we all commonly know as the anxious attachment. Then dismissive, which we would commonly know as avoidant. And then there's unresolved/disorganized. So this can flip between the two. It's kind of unpredictable, erratic sort of behavior. So you kind of flip between the different attachments. The way that you can tell what attachment a child is developing is if a child has a secure attachment, they will be distressed when away from their normal caregiver, but then they will be easily reassured and calmed down. Whereas if a child has an insecure attachment, sometimes they won't care if their caregiver goes away, but they can't be reassured easily when their caregiver comes back. A child can also be seen as on the exterior very normal and calm, but on the inside they're very stressed, or otherwise have really erratic behaviour, up the wall sort of buzz. How insecure attachments develop in kids and how you can tell if it's developing in children. So there will be attention seeking behaviour. So this would usually be, you know, like the class clown, or they could be bullying, or just doing stupid shit all the time that you can't really explain and you don't know why they're doing it. It's usually attention seeking behaviour because they can't communicate properly what they need, so they will just act out in the best way that they know they can. And usually in parent-child relationships, you're going to get a reaction from negative behavior, especially a child that isn't being loved proficiently or isn't receiving conditional love from a parent. The easiest way to get attention from those caregivers is to act out. And also they don't calm down when caregivers return. And then how that develops in adulthood, they'll get a preoccupied attachment. So that means they're extra sensitive, express dramatically, very clingy, and constantly seek reassurance. I would like to reiterate, because I know specifically people with anxious attachment, you'll be listening to this, and usually people with anxious attachment think about the style, think about the effect that they're having on the people around them, because it's the fear of abandonment, and that's why you're acting out and trying to cling on and seeking reassurance, is because you love that person so much and you don't want them to leave you. This does not mean that you're a bad person, and it does not mean that you're unlovable. The only way that you can cure yourself of this anxious attachment and it kind of ease yourself out of it is to be more forgiving of your behavior and know that you are worthy of unconditional love. Because the reason why you're acting out like this and have an anxious attachment and constantly seek reassurance, and usually people with anxious attachments know that they're being clingy and know that they constantly seek reassurance. It's not the opposite with avoidant, where they kind of are unsure of how they're behaving and they think that they're doing the right thing. And people with anxious attachments or preoccupied attachment usually are aware of the fact that they might be annoying the people that they love, or that they're scared the people are going to leave them because they're high needs, or that they're extra clingy. The only way that you can help yourself get through this is to actually do the opposite and stop being so hard on yourself. Know that you are worthy of love, and know that you are worthy of that unconditional love that you so badly seek reassurance for. And I know that's extra difficult, but it does not mean that you're a bad person, and that does not mean that you're unlovable. It's actually the complete opposite. People with anxious attachment just want to love completely and wholly. They probably love more than anyone else, and they're extra empathetic, and they're constantly aware of other people's feelings and emotions because they're so attuned to it, because they're so anxious. I would really like to reiterate that does not mean that you're a bad person or that you're not lovable, because you are extra lovable and you're just a sweet person. You just want to be loved and you want to love other people. It's not the end of the world if you find out, or if you're listening to this going, oh God, I think I am that person. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. These are all just different styles, and you can earn a secure attachment over time with just work on yourself. Another thing I'd like to add is you cannot really get that reassurance from other people, or the expectation that you are going to receive it from other people is just going to leave you in a catch-22 cycle of abuse. The only person you're harming is yourself. No one is going to save you from this and make you, there's not going to be an end goal where the partner that you're with is going to do all these specific things to make you feel better, because when you have an anxious attachment, your mind is constantly scanning for signs that the other person doesn't love you, and that's just the way that your brain is wired. So even if your partner is going above and beyond, does love you unconditionally, but if they say anything that involves conflict or bringing up a problem in the relationship, you are going to see that as the be all and end all, that they want to leave you, that this is the end of the relationship. And that cannot be cured from the other person. You need to be retraining your brain to scan for the lovely things that your partner does for you, and the acts of love that they do for you, and everything positive in the relationship, because otherwise your partner is going to feel fearful for ever bringing up a problem or wanting to fix something to make the relationship better. Because anytime someone in a partnership or a relationship brings up something, approaching you going, I have a problem with this, that is not because they don't want to be with you. It actually means the complete opposite. If anyone ever brings up a problem they have in the relationship that they want to fix and they want to speak over and communicate with you, that is them wanting to make the relationship the best that it can be, so they don't build resentments and you guys can love each other even more. But I know if you have an anxious attachment, it can feel like everything is an attack, or that every single thing like that is a sign that the other person doesn't love you, or that a sign that you're not lovable, or you're imperfect, or you can't be the best partner you can be for them. It's actually the opposite. They wanted you, the two of you, to just be in the best position possible. But I will say, if an anxious attachment person is with an avoidant attachment, that is almost a recipe for disaster. And that's usually it's like the archetype couple from a will they won't they romance novel. Because it makes a good story, and at the end usually it's like, oh, we're going to be the perfect couple now, but realistically, that's not the case. It's like they both need actually extensive therapy and to work on themselves alone separately rather than work through together. Someone with an anxious attachment is going out with someone with an avoidant attachment. You're never, ever going to get that reassurance. The person with the avoidant attachment is never going to bring up a problem because they're avoidant and they don't even realize there's a problem. And then the person with the anxious attachment is so scared of abandonment that they're not going to ever bring up a problem either. So it's usually just going to end in tears. Okay, so avoidant. In children, they appear normal but stressed out on the inside, and they often avoid caregivers. As adults, this develops as uncomfortable with emotions, preferring distraction, rarely communicate their needs, and are proud on being very self-sufficient, but at the expense of emotional connection. Your man in the kissing booth who rides the motorbike, Jacob Elordi, he would be prime example. And it's usually the man, bad boy, that is the archetypal or stereotypical avoidant attached type of person. And for some reason, we've equated that with being mysterious and cool, when in reality, it's probably a nightmare to be with someone like that. You can't meet someone at a specific level if they haven't gone to that level themselves. If you want a deep, intimate connection, it's very hard to emulate that with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. I would say myself, the majority of my life, I've had an avoidant attachment style, so I can speak on my own experience. Now, it has changed depending on who I've been with. I would say I've flipped between anxious and avoidant in my life. Avoidant in terms of I just find it very hard to process things, so I would just choose to ignore them. If there are problems, I will just brush it under the rug and then keep going. So a lot of friendships or relationships in my life in the past have just ended without ever talking about it or trying to figure out why. It's just like, okay, this is over now, which is difficult to learn from. You know, if you're not getting a clear answer as to what went wrong or how you could improve the next time, you're probably just going to repeat those patterns again, because you've never processed them or thought about them or reflected. And usually avoidant is just a protective coping mechanism, you know, self-preservation sort of thing. Whereas if you don't think about something or if you don't acknowledge that there's a problem, somehow you're getting away with it or making yourself believe that there's not a problem to begin with, when realistically it's still there. You're just not coping with it at that time, but usually a few months down the line then it will hit you. That's what I found anyway for myself. I think since I've had my daughter and I've spent a lot of time talking about myself thinking about myself and talking about myself, as self-indulgent as that sounds, and sometimes it does feel very self-indulgent, but at the same time, all of that thinking about yourself and going through your emotions and your past can have a positive impact on your relationships with other people. And specifically if you're a parent and have children, I think that's crucial to have that time to think about your past, about your patterns, about your conflict resolution skills, about your communication skills, so that you could be the best parent possible for your child. Learning the skills to be able to take accountability, to be able to know when you're in the wrong, because I found that very difficult. I mean, it's a bit of a grey area, especially in your brain, if you tend to avoid conflict at all costs. You can never see then your own faults and where you've gone wrong if you're just completely avoiding them. I suppose the same things, it goes the same way, but sort of the opposite with an anxious attachment. If your brain is constantly thinking, I'm unlovable and this person is going to leave me, you're never going to be actually aware of the other things that are going on. I mean, you could be with an absolutely shit partner that's not even treating you right, but you're so focused on receiving a reassurance and validation that you're just with them so that you can feel loved or feel something, even if they're a fucking shithead to you. Okay, and then disorganized attachment. In children, it's portrayed as very erratic behavior, and then in adulthood it develops with seeking and rejecting closeness. I feel like there's a lot of parents with this disorganized attachment. Hot and cold sort of people, you know, they don't know what they want. Seeking and rejecting closeness, difficulties with trust, result of abuse or neglect, chaotic or defensive approach to relationships. And then if you have secure caregivers, they usually get it right. And this isn't rare. I just feel like people who have insecure attachments are probably just drawn to each other because you don't feel like you're worthy enough for someone with a secure attachment. And I do think this is, you know, when you're a teenager, no, not even when you're a teenager, if you have an insecure attachment usually, or if you have low worth, low self-esteem, and you're texting someone, this is only if you're in the talking stages with people or going on dates, and you know if that other person is really into you or likes you a lot, usually we will see that as intense, or there must be something wrong with you to be able to like me that much, so I'm turned off by you. That is usually indicative of your attachment style, I would say. Also, the other person, well, it depends on how intense they're being. But if it's just like firm in, yes, I do want to see you, not like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with you, not obsessive behavior, or if it's actually creepy and intense, that's not what I'm talking about. But if it's just like someone acting normally, offering the normal level of reassurance, wanting to meet up with you, wanting to go on dates with you, and actually respecting you, and you seeing that as a turn off, it's usually you that's the problem. I would like to say, from my own experience, if you're seeing someone and they just have respect for you, and you're going, there must be something fucking wrong with you. You're a weirdo for having respect for me and for treating me nice and for liking me without knowing me that much. I feel like a lot of our parents, it's hard to be perfect. Most parents are gonna, like, I'm 100% going to, have a negative emotional impact on her somehow that I'm not aware of right now, but I'm doing my best. So I can only imagine how difficult it would have been for our parents' generation without all this access to information that we have, without normalizing, going to therapy. It was seen, and this is probably still in certain areas, in more conservative areas, it's still sort of taboo to even say that you're going to therapy, because it's sort of saying there's something seriously wrong with me, rather than you just want to improve as a person. Reading books on psychology or having this, it's crazy that we could just look all this shit up. Whereas our parents didn't have all that, and it wasn't the norm to be like, acknowledge your own faults or what went wrong in your life because you were seen as too soft or a snowflake, even though all those adults now are probably sending abuse on Instagram reel comments because they haven't processed what happened to them in their childhood. So they're going to take it out on someone on the internet. The people who don't have access to all this information when they were younger, or refuse to reflect on their past and how it affected them, or not aware of it, are usually using unhealthy coping mechanisms or taking out their anger on other people, when that's not what we want to be doing anymore. That's why we make these videos on the internet. But yeah, secure caregivers validate and acknowledge a child's feelings. They provide a sense of safety. They effectively manage conflict with warmth and calmness. And then preoccupied caregivers, they overreact and intrude upon their child's emotional experience, causing a very stressful and anxiety-ridden environment. And then dismissive caregivers, they prioritize independence and ignore/intellectualize a child's emotions. Disorganized caregivers are erratic, and they fearfully react to a child's emotional needs. How your parents treat you creates a blueprint for how you think you deserve to be treated. So, if you receive genuine affection, you will feel valued and secure. But if you have a lack of affection/conditional affection, that leaves you with the feeling of being unworthy or being unloved. So I have a little exercise for you all. If you feel like you need some help healing from your childhood or how you were treated as a child. And it doesn't necessarily mean that something had to be terribly wrong. Your parents could still be loving, normal parents, but something slight might have gone wrong in those crucial years for you, where it's kind of had a negative impact on how you view yourself or how you view your worthiness. And that's okay. Everything is worthy of help and care. You're worthy of all this love and attention and care and thought. Just because you're a person, it doesn't mean that something absolutely fucking horrific has had to happen to you for you to be able to look after yourself. It's just regardless of that. If you want to be a better person, if you want to look after yourself, and if you don't want to take out all your negative emotions on other people, that's usually the reason I do it, and why I think so much about my reactions to things and my past is because I don't want to take things out on other people. That's really the only reason I want to do, and I want to be able to love properly and not fuck up my relationships, because I have done that in the past. Friendships have been ruined, relationships have been ruined because I don't know how to process my emotions, and I didn't know how I was reacting. I didn't think that it was abnormal. I just thought that it was a normal way that people go on, and I was usually mirroring the reactions of my parents, or how they treated me, or how they just are as adults. And that doesn't mean that they're bad people as well. They're both loving people. They're both there for me and my siblings, but sometimes it's just not the right way to go about things, and it has had a negative impact on my life, and I would just like to do better. I would like to be a better person. So the little exercise I have here is, what if things were different for you growing up, and what if your needs were totally met? This could also be helpful if you write a letter to your child self on something that you think that you deserved to hear, or something that might have helped you. Or if you can close your eyes and imagine going back to you as a child, as you presenting as yourself now, what would you say to them that would comfort them and make them feel better? Or what do you think they needed to hear? Someone said, I've gone from being anxiously attached my whole life to being with and subsequently having my heart broken by avoidance that I've now become avoidant. I feel like I've lost a lot of my softness and believe in love, which I always saw as some of my core characteristics. Oh, that's awful. See, that's what I mean by you can switch between attachment styles throughout your whole life and depending on who you're with. The good news is your brain is elastic and it can be trained in different ways so that you actually behave in different ways as well. And it does take a lot of work. I will say that being alone does help a lot. You can now retrain your brain, but it is going to be much harder if you're in a relationship with someone to figure out those problems. But what really helped with me, because the same thing I think happened to me. I was very anxious. I went from being avoidant to then anxious to then avoidant again. Which is, I remember for a small snippet of my romantic life being really anxious. And I think it was because the person I was with wasn't actually, I thought that it was real normal because I'm avoidant, but they must have been avoidant as well, but worse than me. And I wasn't receiving any reassurance at all. And I wasn't used to that. And then they were actually kind of sneaky and texting her, looking at other girls. And that obviously had a huge negative impact on me. I nearly fucking lost my mind, to be honest. And then I went avoidant again. I completely hardened up. And it just really, and it fucked up a lot of my relationships. The only way I spent then a year and a half single, then healing myself, thinking about, now I spent a lot of that fucking riding around and being a slag. But I did also spend a lot of it journaling, time with myself, looking after myself, and a lot of thinking. And I do think that did help me soften out a lot. And I find it really hard not to slip back into the avoidant style because it's just so much easier than being soft. And I think it actually is, it's so brave to open up your heart to someone else and to give them the power to be able to hurt you if you have been hurt so many times. So I've always tried to go back because nothing feels better than loving someone and being loved in return. But I suppose to avoid the being hurt and have your heart broken, we can just slip back into avoiding loving completely and opening up our heart as sort of self-preservation and a protection method, which does in turn damage your relationships. It damages your friendships and your romantic relationships. And it's really, really not worth it. If we want the world to be a more loving and forgiving place, we have to start with ourselves. We have to start at home in our hearts. So that's the way I mean, I know if you don't have children, it's really hard to describe this, but if you have avoidant, you can't love a child wholly and properly the way that they deserve to. You will have a negative impact on them if you are an avoidant person, because you just can't be receptive to their emotions. You really need to break down all those walls and be so vulnerable to be able to love a child completely and wholly. And because you have to be so strong for them, because if you're reactive to another person's emotions so much that you turn away, I mean, your child is going to feel neglected and not looked after and not cared for. So if you could imagine yourself maybe looking after, in your head, you're looking after yourself as a child or your own baby, and it's like your inner child is crying out to be cared for and looked after, but you're denying them that as out of protection, which is fair enough because, having emotions is hard. It's sometimes overwhelming. But if you can imagine yourself as a baby, how would you want to be looked after? And if you could look after yourself like you're a child, with the same empathy and love and care as you would a child, you would be able to improve your romantic relationships and your friendships because you'd be completely vulnerable with each other. Does that make sense? I grew up in a household where the silent treatment from one parent was the norm, sometimes for 2 or 3 days at a time. Now finding myself completely unable to deal with day-to-day conflicts in my romantic relationship, I completely freeze up and retreat like I used to as a child instead of having the confidence to talk it out. Currently working on this in therapy, and it's been really helpful in understanding how my childhood self is impacting my current relationships. Again, I'd like to go back to, because people with anxious attachments think that conflict or a problem being brought up in a relationship means that you're not loved or that your relationship is going to end, and that's not the case. Your relationship is not a bad relationship depending on how much you argue or how much you're having fights. It's all about how you fight. One of the common themes I feel like in relationships that I've had is if you bring up a problem. Now, I've really tried to improve on my conflict resolution and how I communicate problems, because I will usually not say things, expect my other partner to pick up on the hints that I'm giving, build resentment, and then once we have a fight about one thing, I'll bring up every single other thing that I have a problem with, which you are never going to come to a resolution if that's how you're approaching conflict. Nothing is ever going to get solved. If you're saying, oh, it's annoying the way you go on your phone when we're watching a movie in the evening, and then the other person is going, well, you never buy me flowers, and you never clean up after yourself, and you never put things in the laundry basket, and you never give me affection at nighttime. You don't even kiss me goodbye in the morning when you're going to work. I want more good morning texts from you. I want you to plan dates. You know, that is like unloading on your partner. And that's when it can sometimes feel like the end of a relationship, because I'm coming to you with one issue and you're coming at me with 10, you know, so it feels like a competition sort of, rather than actually talking to each other like adults and wanting to have a good relationship. So the way that I've approached problems, and I know it can't be really related because I'm not in a romantic relationship right now, but I think being in a co-parenting situation with my babies, with my baby daddy, there's no way to make that sound like mature, my baby daddy, my daughter's dad. So it's just easier to say baby daddy. So anyway, you really have to have really good communication skills in a co-parenting relationship if you want to have a good family dynamic, because I've experienced my parents don't speak to each other. They won't talk to each other if one of us gets married, and that's not a nice environment for, even if you're an adult, as a child, as a daughter of my parents. It's not nice to see, and it's not something that I wanted for my daughter either. I wanted us to be able to still have family days out. I wanted us to get to a point where we could be friends. It really, really pushes to the forefront the priorities in a relationship, even if it's not romantic. So we needed to work these things out. I would really recommend, though, if you are in a co-parenting relationship, to get a mediator or a couples counsellor, even if you're not planning to get together, because it can be hard sometimes to get a non-biased opinion. Because if you're asking like your friends and family for advice, they're usually just going to always be on your side, and you want to actually have real advice to be able to move forward. But anyway, I found that the co-parenting relationship has just really matured me, and the only thing I was thinking about was I want my daughter to have a good childhood and I want us to have a good relationship for her. So that really made it easy to suck things up and actually speak about things as soon as they happen. That's not to say that we haven't had a lot of volatility in our relationship and haven't fought. Like, there's been many a times where we've hated each other, but we're able to suck it up, and we can happily now say we've gotten to a place where we get along, which is it's really hard to get there, and it does take a lot of work, but that is all down to not building resentments and not holding things against each other and not being in a competition. Because once you have children as well, it's so easy to slip into that where you're keeping tabs on each other, because it feels very unfair. Everything feels very unfair, but nothing is fair after you have a child. It's just like your priority is looking after another human. Nothing's going to be fair ever again. But I think that it's so easy to be like, I'm doing a lot more than you and you're not doing as much as me, and but also the other thing is your partner has to be receptive enough to be able to comprehend what you're saying and actually take things on. If you're saying the same thing more than 3 times, there's usually a much bigger issue at hand. If your partner is refusing to go to, couples counselling, if your partner is refusing to speak to you on things, that's when obviously there's a lot more, the issue runs a lot deeper than just your conflict style. It's usually like, are you with the right person if they're not willing to actually work on the relationship together? Being able to bring up issues as soon as they arise and to be able to work it out together and actually wanting a resolution, because sometimes, and I've noticed this in my own behaviour and other people everyone probably slips into this though, sometimes you just want to fight. Sometimes, and I do think this, if you're used to a household that was erratic, unpredictable, and you feel like passion is in the same realm as fighting and being angry with each other, rather than passion being like love, because love and hate are in the very, very near each other in the same family. I mean, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. So sometimes we can get mixed up between the two. I mean, it's the same thing with like attention-seeking behaviours. Sometimes we can slip back into that where we will just create a fight to try get a reaction from your partner, or for them to prove how much they love you. I've definitely been guilty of this myself in my past relationships, where I'm starting a fight because I wanted their attention or I want to be reassured about something because I don't understand or I haven't thought about what the actual problem is. So you have to make sure that you're not just looking for a fight. You actually just want to make things better and you want the issue to go away and you want it to stop. So it could be, I want you to plan more dates. How are you going to bring this up? You're not going to wait until, well, you did this. You're not going to wait until they bring up a problem so that you can retaliate with the problem that you have. It's usually, can I check in with you? Can I talk to you about something? And then you have to usually offer what the resolution is or come to a resolution together. You can't be expecting the other person to kind of fix it when you're the one with the problem. And I know sometimes that can be annoying if you're looking for extra reassurance. For example, if you're in a house and you feel like it's really, the disparity between the domestic labour is really uneven. So you're coming home from work and you're doing the dinner and washing up and putting the kids to bed. Or you're doing all the laundry and planning the dates at the weekend. That is not you being angry with the actual work. It's much deeper than that. It's you not feeling loved enough for your partner to see those things or want to help you out or to make you feel relaxed and cared for. It's not the fact that you hate doing dishes or the fact that you hate doing laundry. It's the fact that you don't feel loved enough or cared for in your relationship for your partner to want to do those things for you. Because no one wants to do those things, but it's how are you not noticing all the things that I'm doing for you? How are you not appreciating me? It's like, if I'm doing one thing, could you not even us out and balance the relationship by doing another? And sometimes you can feel really dramatic or that you don't want to nag and you don't want to repeat yourself and nag for the rest of your life. And that's usually what the problem is. So it's how you bring up those problems and how you come to a resolution together and not having to repeat yourself ever again. Obviously, we've all fought with our parents. And if there's ever been conflict, I would always reflect on when I was a child, if there was conflict in my house or between my parents and me, or if just between my parents, did I feel safe and comforted and reassured? Did you feel like it was the end of the world and your parents were going to kick you out if you did one thing wrong? Or did you feel like your parents loved you regardless and they only just want the best for you and for you to be the best person that you can possibly be? Or did you feel scared and like it was the end of the world? Because usually in conflict then, when conflict arises, that feeling as a child is going to come up again. As a defense mechanism, sometimes we can be like, well, fuck you. This is all the problems I have with you, out of fear of abandonment or not knowing how to fight or feeling like you're unloved. So you kind of harden up to make it seem like you don't care either. In terms of separation, do you feel like you crave alone time or do you feel anxious and clingy when you're away from your partner? Is it like you're not getting enough reassurance if your partner spends time away from you? Usually then you can kind of have a better understanding of the kind of attachment style that you have from reflecting on those two things, your conflict and your separation. For people with anxious attachment, to combat that clinginess and to help with the seeking constant reassurance or validation from your partner is to try retrain your brain to scan and look for all the acts of love that your partner does for you, all the compliments that they give you, the little acts of service and the validation. So that will retrain your brain to scan for the positives rather than the negatives. And it is really hard work, but you have to make a conscious effort to do those things. And the only person, again, you're helping is yourself, and it is going to help your relationship. These are the traits of someone with a secure attachment, if this is the kind of thing that you want to strive towards. So someone with a secure attachment is caring, empathetic, receptive, takes accountability, takes time and self-care, and pays attention to your partner's well-being. I feel a sense of sadness and experience damaging thoughts when my partner wants to hang out with his friends. I feel scared and alone. It's been super tough on my partner and I, as I'm always seeking validation and closeness, even when at times I know we need alone time. I have been in this situation as well. You get so clingy and it feels as if you feel like a loser as well. You literally feel, now this has happened to me on 2 occasions. I turn into a nut job and it's like I get addicted to the other person and I want to spend every single second with them. So as soon as they want alone time or to be with their friends, I think that they're getting sick of me or they're bored of me or they think that I'm obsessed with them. And I just want them to be as obsessed with me as I am with them. It's like, do you not want to spend every single second with me? Or is there something wrong with me? You obviously don't love me, So, but then now, since I have a child, I value my alone time so much. And I know that I really need that to relax and calm down. And if you focus or if you put all of your energy into one person, everything in your life, every aspect of your life gets affected. Your relationship with your family, your relationship with your friends, your career, your self-esteem, your self-worth, if you're so reliant on another person to give you all of those things, to fulfill your cup, to fulfill your social cup, and it would just damage you so much. What I did once when I was single, it took me a long time, especially after I broke up with my baby daddy. It took me a long time during those weekends when I was away from her and away from him. That was the longest I've spent basically on my own since I had her, and I didn't know what to do with myself, and the majority of the time I was actually just looking at the wall. But that alone time helped me so much more with my relationships and my friendships that I do have now. It has helped me just look after myself and know which direction I'm going in, if you know what I mean. What I did was, I would usually, if I don't plan how I spend my alone time, I will end up just literally sitting on my arse, looking out the window, looking at the wall, or on my phone, which is obviously not good for you at all. So I would keep a list of everything that you want to do when you're alone, because there are only specific things, especially if you're with a partner with different enjoyment, if they have different hobbies and different likes to you, because they're obviously a separate entity to you. Of course there's going to be things that they don't like that you like, for example, going to a pottery class, or specific movies that you want to go see in the cinema, or going to plays, or going for hikes. There are going to be things that sometimes that your partner doesn't like doing but you like doing. So I would definitely try plan ahead to do those things either with another loved one like your friend, or on your own. If your partner has planned to go out with their friends, make sure that you have something else planned during that time as well, because you will just get stuck in your head and in your own thoughts if they're out doing something and you're home alone not doing anything. That's usually when it's the hardest, and you're not helping yourself by doing that. Okay, I think that's all we have time for. I would love to know more about other people's attachment styles, and how, if you have gone from either being anxious attached or avoidant to now be having an earned secure attachment, what kind of things you do to help that or combat that, or how have you reflected on your own past behaviours to try turn it into something else or flip it on its head. I definitely have an avoidant dad and disorganised mum, but that's fine. I love them for who they are. And unfortunately, children are biologically wired to unconditionally love their parents, which is why it's such a fucking kick in the teeth if you don't have parents that love you back. And the majority of the time they don't. Most of the time, love does feel conditional with other adults. But for some reason, kids, I don't know why that is, but children will love their parents regardless. They did a study on children who were taken into foster care, and the majority of the children, regardless of their situation at home, would always choose to be with their actual biological parents than be in foster care. Even if it was the most horrible environment ever, they would always choose to be with their biological parents. And we were wired to be that way, or to be with the not biological parents, but the caregivers that they have grown up with. They don't have to be actually related to them, but usually the people that you grow up with and look after you as a baby, we would always choose them over everything else. So it can be really hard to decompartmentalize how your parents have treated you, and whether it was like the right or wrong thing to do, because we're always going to love them regardless of how they treated us.